Respected Dr. Kapila Vatsayan, respected Dr. Kavita Sharma, our Secretary, Mr. Ravindra Datta, fellow colleagues, professionals, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be with you for a very vital topic of discussion, which at the last moment, respected Kapila ji has agreed to chair on behalf of the President, who is presently indisposed with sudden illness. But before Kapila ji takes over, I have been requested to request Dr. Kavita Sharma to say a few things, and then we'll start the proceedings with the presidential remark of Kapila ji. Dr. Kavita Sharma.
Friends, delighted to be here, and I want to only add a footnote. Most of you are familiar with Dr. Kavita Sharma. As someone who has been an academic for long years and knows about libraries or running of libraries in colleges, but as the former director of the India International Center, she transformed this library into what it is today with a very deft hand. I will not go into her other achievements, but I think it is necessary for all of you to know and welcome her in her new position as the president of the SARC University. And it is in that capacity, as someone who is now steering or is going to be steering a university which is a consortium of all the SARC countries, and what it requires for such an institution, Madam Kavita Sharma, to have a library which will cater to not knowledge in the abstract, not knowledge in terms of just global, which many of my friends will be speaking about, but knowledge in terms of this geographical area which is very special as both a geographical entity as also an entity which comprises 7 or 8 members as they go along, with very distinct, and if I may use this passé word called culture, cultural identities. And the challenge before a librarian or a library would be how to cater to both, as one would say, in this case, not just the global and not just the local, but the regional. And with these few words, I call upon Dr. Kavita Sharma to address you, since she has to leave soon. Dr. Kavita Sharma.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vatsayan, and all my colleagues here. To begin with, libraries are a passion for me. And so wherever I see a library, it's like, in today's world, you would say a disease. I just migrate towards that and I start doing something there. Now, although I know this is the latest buzzword that it's India's new revolution, I have a few issues whether a knowledge society is India's new revolution. I think India was a knowledge society way before knowledge society was ever thought of or heard of. And if you just see from the first written word of the world, that is the Rig Veda, right up to now, India has always been a knowledge society. And it is India that, with its knowledge society, got scholars from outside to come to India and sent people from India outside, and that is the power of ideas, and that is how Indian civilizational ideas spread all over the world, and they interacted with what was there, with the genius of that place, and new ways of assimilating, integrating, transforming, connecting with each other happened in that. So, you know, when we talk of knowledge society, we only think of the ICT and the fact that, oh, now today you can get through Google or whatever else. I mean, the joke is to Google is to know. So, you know, and there is a neurosis that so much is passing through on that net. How can you get to everything? So I don't think this is a new revolution. In fact, it says when Indian knowledge became dormant, why is it that every aggressor came and attacked our manuscripts and libraries and institutions of learning? When it became dormant, it led to the fall of India. So for any nation to build itself, it has to be a knowledge society. And military might is not, I mean, we can't be as mighty as many others are, but that's not the aspirational value anyway, except as a deterrent value. Economics, but economics without knowledge, and not just knowledge in the superficial term, we need to have that wisdom to be able to use that knowledge. Now, libraries is something that are repositories of knowledge, of ideas, of civilizational values, of all that is creative in human beings, and which has manifested itself in their writings, in the creative works that they have produced. And so, if used properly, then they are of transformational value. The problem is libraries are not used, are not valued the way they should be valued. Maybe we need a different way of moving towards making people aware of the libraries, but certainly they can transform society. That is the value of libraries. And when I was doing my Fulbright fellowship, I had a very interesting colleague who was working in Kenya and Uganda. And her main thing was how to establish village libraries. Because you cannot do literacy, that is what we are doing. We are trying to do literacy as a mechanical thing without creating a love for reading. And libraries, however small, if you have even one little room where you have some interesting books where children come to read only because they want to read, not because somebody has slapped them into submission because they need to pass an exam, then they will always read, and you don't need to do what we are doing. Now, I'll come to the Delhi libraries a little while later, but I've been going to Seva. And in Seva, there was this village where you have library work that goes on, the mirror work. And those children were asked to put up a little show for me and show off their knowledge of English. I was so embarrassed. Little child after little child got up and started saying 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, that was their great achievement, that they had been asked to mug up that 1, 2, 3, 4. And I said, you know, in 5,000 rupees, you can create a decent library for children. So the first thing that we need to do is in all these centers, create a few shelves of books which are attractive, where children want to come and read. So I did say that to them, and hopefully they're implementing it. And ask the children to create their own libraries. I believe that was wildly successful. Ask them to write out their own family trees. Ask their mothers, ask their grandmothers, let them draw. Let them write about the stories, about the games that they play, and not what we impose on them. We think we educate them by telling them how to play table tennis, but they play lots of very interesting games which are not documented, and we always go to teach them, we don't go to learn from them. And I was quite amazed, an 11, 12-year-old girl who was wearing a lovely lehenga of mirror work. And she said, I said, what a beautiful traditional lehenga you're wearing. She said, nahi, iska to design badal gaya hai. Now, to my eye, it looked all the same, which means I was ignorant. She said, ye meri maa ke lehenge se fark hai. इसका डिजाइन नया हो गया है. Now all this is not documented, and children should be encouraged to create their own little libraries. Now why do I say that we are apart from the historical things? I was also very amazed to find, because I've been researching the walled city and actually the libraries in the walled city. And I was quite amazed to find that har ek rais aadmi had a tradition of having a huge collection of books. And I was told by some of the old timers there that in the evenings in the courtyard, there would be a session where people would be called upon to dispute a certain subject, debate on it, discourse on it. And those books would be used by the scholars to prove their point. And there were 3 layers in that gathering. One was the layers of the scholars who had read a whole lot of these books, and therefore they were disputing them and they were allowed to argue. There was a second layer of the rich, and they could question but not argue. And then there was a third layer of what we would call today Aam Aadmi, who was just supposed to sit there and absorb. And this used to go on, and that is why the walled city is full of people who have large personal collections of books. And I was also very amazed to find that every masjid had a huge collection of books. So I went to Fatehpuri Masjid, and they are, you will cry. For 25 years they haven't had a librarian since the last librarian passed away. And they have books, because that was a repository library. And when 1857 happened, then when a lot of massacre took place, people sent their books to the masjid for safekeeping. And this is what happened in 1947 also. That when they were running away, a lot of books just got destroyed, thrown into the Jamna, sold off to kabadis. But a lot of people who could find the way before escaping sent it to Fatehpuri Masjid. And they were very nice. They showed, Dr. Majumdar and I went, they took us, they must have found us very compassionate. They took us to their little rooms which had not been opened for years. And all those books, invaluable books, are lying there. Then we did an exhibition here during the IIC experience on the Hazrat Shah Waliullah library. But that's not an old library. There was some rioting in the walled city. And the people gathered together, and harking back to their old tradition, they decided to pool in their books so that the young people do not go astray. And they have a place to come to in the evening to study and to read good books. And then, of course, this collection has grown into an invaluable collection. So there seem to be 3 layers. And then the Hindu merchant class, as they came to an ascendance, they seem to have collected a lot of books. So we went to the Jain library, we went to the Marwadi library, and they have invaluable books. There are libraries which are being just ruined. You have the Hardayal library, which has holding of over 1 lakh of books. They have manuscripts. They have rare books, because that, it is very interesting that the British, before the opening of the Suez Canal, they had 7-8 months on the ship which brought them to India. So they brought huge collections of books to read on that ship. So by the time they came here, what to do with those books? So they started to put them into a place, and it was named as the Institute, which was then housed in the town hall. And then when a bomb was thrown on Lord Hardinge, a new library was created as Hardinge Library, and all those books were transferred there. And then in the 70s, it turned into the Hardayal Library, the person who had inspired the revolutionaries to throw this bomb. Now that, if you go there, has invaluable collection of books. And in all these libraries, you have Congress Working Committee meetings that used to be held, revolutionaries that used to come there. And given the time, our historians need to go and make So that's why I say that these are transformational things. I was struck by this, that when there's a rioting and everybody dies and is killed or massacred, then what do people do? They start a library. Now somewhere the elite of this country doesn't start a library. We who are the decision makers are ruining those libraries. It's the people who are poor, who don't have resources of space or money, who are trying to preserve the books. That's an amazing kind of a thing. And so to say that we have a knowledge revolution now, I am not very sure of this knowledge revolution, but we need to spend our energies, create a movement where all these personal collections and all these things come out. I did, after a lot of running around, manage to get a grant for the Hazrat Shah Waliullah Library to have 2,500 books of theirs conserved and restored. But, you know, everyone who goes there says, हमको किताबें दे दो, हम अपने कॉलेज में रख देंगे, हम अपने यूनिवर्सिटी में रख देंगे. Delhi Public Library, which started as a UNESCO project, because Pandit Nehru had the same idea that libraries will transform society. There's no collection of Delhi left there. And they claim, आग लग गई थी तो कुछ जल गए. How can we be doing this? So, I mean, as people connected with education, with the field of library, all of us must struggle and find where are these books. I know that there are plenty of such collections in Jaipur. Many people told me about them. In Banaras, Dr. Vatsayan will know huge collections with pandits and with various institutions. They're all going to seed. They're all being thrown away. There are original accounts, eyewitness accounts of 1857 lying in Lucknow, in people's basements, which are just going. So we need to put this together, and we need to start a movement by which the government understands that they have to preserve them, digitize them, then only you have a knowledge society. Otherwise there is no knowledge society. I mean, everybody reads the same commerce and the same computer science and the, you know. And now South Asia, my final point. What is so rich about this region? We are really the first world in terms of art, heritage, civilizational collections showing our civilizational values, creations, aesthetics, architecture, philosophy, religion, and that's what is the most neglected, to the point where we don't even know which are our major libraries and what are their holdings. So another movement, if we have to create a consciousness of the region and take a long view of history and not the last 70-75 years, would be to connect all these rich resources that are lying and make them available to each other. I have asked Mr. Abdullah to do something about it and Dr. Majumdar to do something about it. The pace is slow. You know, Dr. Majumdar knows I'm used to working very quickly on these things, but anyway, hopefully we will do some kind of a conference and bring people together and try and brainstorm from these various regions on how to make this available. I think that's real connectivity. So, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Playing the president's role in his absence without a stitch of paper. I suppose that this is what new knowledge is all about. Because we shall have paperless. I don't want it from you, I want it from the organizer. Yeah. Anyhow, I can't read. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have brought in a dimension which perhaps all my colleagues here, some I recognize, some I don't recognize, will say, oh, and I can be facetious. This is all about old libraries. इस सब का क्या मतलब है? हम तो न्यू नॉलेज सोसाइटी की बात कर रहे हैं. न्यू underlined, knowledge underlined, redefined. That's the most important. And society, if there be such a thing. Sorry for my facetiousness. But I think that this needs to be, because we have a tendency in all domains and many disciplines that when a new discipline comes into being, then the earlier disciplines are either marginalized or new definitions are given. And this is what from no paper that I have received or have in front of me, it would appear from speaking to my very eminent colleagues on either side and Usha there, that the emphasis at this meeting today, and I hope I'm wrong, or at least partially wrong, which I'm often, is that we're talking in terms of whatever semantics that we may use. We are talking of a certain transformation, or you may not call it a revolution, which has taken place in terms of the communication of all that we consider as knowledge. Because the means have changed, and therefore the means are also driving the content to a point. And I think this is what they will be talking about. I shall not take the floor any further, despite Mr. Majumdar's very gentle but emphatic thing about presidential remarks. I'm afraid I'm only a stepney here. And while I'm as much a bookworm as Kavita ji is, almost a little more in some ways of having dealt with manuscripts, and I have one or two colleagues here who know something about my little past, but we shall not. Now I'll pass on to Usha Munshi, who is going to conduct the meeting.
No, that's okay. A very good evening to all of you. It is Honorable Chair of the session, Dr. Vatsan, Dr. Sharma, Shri Datta, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed an honor and pleasure for me to be here, and I thank IIC for giving me this opportunity. Well, I have begun with the responsibility of introducing the topic, which is Knowledge Society, India's New Revolution. Well, if you just look at the Peter Drucker's quote, he said that knowledge is the central capital, the cost center, and crucial resource of the economy. Therefore, what is the role of the library in this knowledge-based society, or how does library fit into this new framework? Well, the library is a node. It renders services since last, I think, over 2,500 years. But in return expects very little to be appreciated for what it is giving to the society at large. Now, permit me to give you a link. The oldest institution in the world is the library. That is providing the place, a social place, a constant over time, no matter what changes have taken place, and are a connection to our past intellectual capital. Therefore, librarians and libraries have accepted, and they are determined to accept these challenges over whatever revolutions have taken place. And if you just look at this wheel, 3000 BC, Sumerians invented writing, and they wrote on the clay tablets. And these clay tablets were housed in boxes with the labeling on the top of the box that gives what is contained in these boxes, clay tablets. So that perhaps was the first reference library. In Egyptian, they housed these libraries in temples, and they used papyrus as the writing material. And look at the engraving on the entrance of those temples which housed these libraries was healing place for the soul. We all are familiar with Alexandria Library. Of course, it met an unfortunate end towards the starting of the 47 BC. What I'm trying to say that each civilization had libraries, and in Rome, by the end of 350 AD, there were 29 libraries identified, there is a record of this. And during the Greeks had these libraries as there were public and private libraries, and most of these libraries during the Greek period was part of the gymnasiums because they were a social place. And for the Romans, they were part of the baths. And what was the incredible invention, perhaps a innovative step in managing the information, was that Romans invented codex that paved the way for creation of the catalog, and that made retrieval of the information little easier. Of course, in Middle Ages, you had monastery libraries and scriptoria. They were important in preserving knowledge, but they also restricted access to the knowledge at that point in time. Coming to the period when we had emergence of, printing press and things like that, and so there was flood of information, and librarians who were managing this knowledge had to find out innovative mechanisms of storing, preserving, recording, and disseminating this information, how to retrieve that. And there was no looking back. The transition was inevitable. We had Internet of Things, and so we are rolling out our mechanisms, looking at what is relevant today to retrieve the pertinent information from this voluminous, huge Gallo-Colossal information deluge that we have. Because you have to make meaning out of the mess that we have right now, right? So librarians are addressing that. Now, therefore, when we talk about these knowledge societies and libraries and information centers, we know that with the advent of the information and communication technology, we had a lot of avenues in storing this, retrieving this information. Therefore, the domain of services of the library had widened, and we had responded to this new innovations, information and communication technology innovations. Now, here, libraries in this change also have acted as intellectual commons for the communities, and also a learning and resource center for the users all along these changes. Now, when we look at these four hubs, these four components, which my fellow panelists are going to deliberate, let's talk about the knowledge management and the knowledge economy. Now, in this knowledge management value chain, we have been constantly addressing to how to access, how to preserve the knowledge assets to support the learning, to support innovations, to bring, and help society at large. So what do? We are applying knowledge management techniques. Let me tell you, knowledge itself, it's not managed. It's the processes that are managed. And this is exactly, these processes are being handled by the librarians. So what does librarians do? They capture information, they codify this information, they create, they store, they preserve this information for posterity, for future generations, and provide a mechanism which is authentic, which is trusted in the new ICT environment. They are create trusted digital libraries, repositories, provide access to the subject content, thereby they add value, economic value to these resources, and help in the economic development activities through education, supporting development in administration, research, culture, and literacy missions. Therefore, they are a key constant in transforming this society and wealth generation. Now, coming to the second component of this, which is big and open data. Now, here, equitable and universal access to quality data and information has been at the heart of the library information services. And library have been supporting all the three important pillars of the openness, which are open data and files, open licensing, and open collaboration. And when you look at these open files, where academic and research community has had great role in open access movement and initiatives, be it Budapest Open Access Initiative, be it Berlin Declaration, be it Bethesda Initiative Declaration, be it Wellcome Trust Statement. Let me tell you that outside Germany, India was the first country to sign the Berlin Declaration. And those of you who are associated with creation of the knowledge repositories, trusted knowledge repositories, would know that the flourishing of these trusted digital repositories took place only after we were signatory to the Berlin Declaration. Now, what role did libraries and librarians play? Librarians and libraries actually have substantial role in opening up open access routes and roads. When we talk about the open access routes, I am focusing on the green and the gold route. The green route of something like this, where the researchers publish in the commercial research journals and submit a copy to their institutional repositories as well for wider dissemination, for unrestricted, unlimited and open access by the public at large, or to the gold route where the researchers publish their papers in the open access journals. Now the big message here is that the so-called information, the widening gap of information haves and have-nots have been bridged by these initiatives, by facilitating open access to the scholarly content. Of course, somebody pays for creation of this content, but the beauty of these open access initiatives is to the end user, it is free. It does not discriminate between the researchers from the poorer nations and researchers from the richer nations. So it's a huge, huge innovative step in terms of facilitating access to the resources, quality resources. Now, of late, librarians have also initiated venturing into open data, open and linked data field. They have been finding out mechanisms. How do we boost the culture of promoting this open and linked data on the same platform as we did for the open files? Of course, most of the data right now that is available as open and linked data is from the government sector, but we are endeavoring to venture into areas where research data could also be placed in the open platform. The next big thing is the big data. And of course, librarians by nature are willing to get associated with any such activity that facilitates distinctive utilization of the quality data. Therefore, they're looking for pastures, endeavoring to explore pastures where they could have meaningful interaction and support the initiatives, the global initiatives of Digital India, NEGP, by giving contribution in the big data arena. Now, if you look at this big data arena, a lot of things are, these issues are being debated. Of course, we have Biplav here. What way librarians can meaningfully and innovatively contribute to this? And I think Biplav is going to focus on some of those issues in his presentation. But here I would like to share with you that International Council of Science, one of the scientific committees of the International Council of Science, CODATA, they have constituted a committee, data policy committee, around 2 years back. It's a 4-member committee, and incidentally, I'm one of the members. And we came out with the guidelines, principles for future, data principles for future Earth, which are in the draft mode right now. At the same time, these kind of activities saw spurt of activities and the issues being deliberated during the SciDataCon 2014, which was actually organized by the CODATA and World Data System Japan and International Science Academy at JNU campus during 2nd to 5th November. And we had a session where Dr. Biplav was also there. They had practical research. They presented, the 3 of them presented the practical research on big data. And we are going to have much more regional workshops to promote and identify that what is it that we can research on and what is it that information field can, how meaningfully information scientists can also contribute to this. We are working towards that. But DST has recently constituted Consultative Development Committee, and Dr. Arora is also there. The first meeting was on 28th, where they are identifying, parameters to create a roadmap, strategic roadmap for big data analytics for the government. And what we identified is the potential stakeholders and finalizing of the 4 different questionnaires which have already been sent to these potential stakeholders to identify what is the current state of data in the country so that this roadmap could be constructed in near future, and some meaningful inferences can be drawn based on this. The final component which Dr. Roy is going to discuss is new identities. Now, in this new identities, how libraries are fitting into these new norms, we know with the, there are paradigm technologies unfolding every now and then. And not each technology, new advance is labeled as a very breakthrough. Of course, we know that all that is coming up does not alter, it's not a major breakthrough, and it does not alter the way we live and work, but some of the technologies have the potential to change the status quo, alter the way people live and work, and repurpose, reorganize their value pools. So what is happening? It's therefore very important for us to understand that which technologies are going to help us and plan a strategic program accordingly. But what is it that in these new norms or new identities, libraries and librarians are doing? We are creating discipline in 3 domains: learning, capturing, and reflecting. Learning the new best practices so that we can innovate in rendering the services better, capturing those best practices and reflecting those best practices in the services that we deliver to the user. Now, what is happening? We are making space for innovations. We are shifting from managing the stocks to participate in flows, which helps in learning and accelerating capacity building. And the flow catalyst in this is, these are the flow catalysts, while we take on board local ecosystems and process networks which are important for building the capacity and bringing innovation in the system. Now here, these advances, these flow local ecosystem and process networks are used to bring innovations in the knowledge management practices, knowledge management processes of creating, capturing, organizing, transmitting, and sharing this information, and these advances are made on the technological frontier. And while we are making these advances, some of these advances are at the component level, and some are at the system level, some are incremental, and some are radical. When I say some are incremental, what do I mean? Infer by this is that we do what we do in a little better way, what we do at the moment. For instance, when we started automation, what was our intention at that time was to facilitate easy lending and borrowing of books and retrieve the document from the shelf. But now, the medium level innovation was that we created digital libraries, we migrated to trusted digital repositories. Then we thought, no, this is not enough. We have to have persistent access to the resources that we put in the digital arena. So we started talking about the persistent identifiers or the handle system. We also thought that there should be interoperable, two distinct digital libraries should be able to talk to each other and facilitate access. So we thought of an environment which is called IIPA. We harvested data from repositories spread all over the world, and fact brought innovation in retrieving the data, in information search, so that our search results are concise, relevant, and contextualized. This is what we did. Now, therefore, this knowledge system society has brought into new occupational momentum, mobility and choice. Nobody will argue that. But in all this, what did libraries do? We have actually adopted those trends to serve the users better, to make the collection available to them, to create, draw inferences to support their information requirements. We have created innovative spaces and also built partnerships. We value knowledge common principles, and we have enabled creation of the new knowledge by instilling a knowledge vision, managing conversations, mobilizing knowledge activities, and creating right context. We have also helped, libraries have helped to work at web scale. While I was looking at the book which Dr. SinghaRoy has written, I was just trying to read the reviews. The reference, what we used to do maybe 50, 60 years ago, see and see also reference, which will help user to identify, okay, say, if you are just looking at this document, please refer to this and this also. The only point at the problem at that point in time is that he has to leave that space and try to find out that C and C also reference from the stock. And today, when I looked at his book, it says people who have viewed this book have also viewed Peter Drucker's book, The Age of Discontinuity. And I didn't have to leave the space. I clicked and read his book also. Whatever reviews were there, I read. So what was the difference between Peter Drucker's book and his book? I could read in the same place. But it's the same meaning. But the only thing has changed that we have brought little innovations and made little life easier for the users to use the so-called what Web 2.0 says, long tail, and we have conveniently picked up as a tagging. We use these tags. Okay? And finally, I would like to say the collaborative. Forgive me by saying that libraries have pioneered networking. We have developed robust networks to facilitate resource sharing and cooperative cataloging. We leverage aggregator platforms to deliver electronic data. We create vibrant consortia and groups to facilitate information sharing of the services. Of course, networking area, lot of advantages are there, but still what library networks can deliver has still not been, that potential has not been realized so far. But yes, we know the future is highly dynamic, and there's a lot of full of possibilities for the library arena. And finally, while we keep maintaining our core values of these 7 core values, libraries have played an important role in social transformation and thereby wealth generation, and they will continue to play a strategic role in social development in various sectors, therefore bring change in the society and build a true knowledge society. With this, I stop here, and I'm sure that you are as eager to listen to other panelists who are going to give more insights into some of the components that I very, very briefly touched upon. Thank you.
Usha, you're conducting this or am I conducting it? You're conducting this or am I? Huh? नहीं, आप करो ना, आप introduce करो.
All right. Now we have, I have pleasure to introduce Dr. Arora, Praveen Arora, who is advisor and scientist Shri and head National Science and Technology Management Information System, Department of Science and Technology, and who's going to speak on knowledge economy and knowledge management. But let me tell you that he is also handling a very important project of deciphering the impact that Indian research have made on the society and how we can improve this impact, what are the parameters, and we are going to come out with a white paper. Over to you, Dr. Arora.
Hello. So good evening to everyone, and in fact I am delighted in this that I have been given a chance to share my views in this August gathering. And though I am not a librarian per se, but then I have been a vivid reader and user of library products and its services. So, but in our DST, I am handling, as Usha Munshi told, the information systems for science and technology. And in fact, what we do is we bring out the evidence and build some indicators which are called science and technology indicators. Of course, indicators could be in the social stream as well, to assess the health of science and technology in the country, and they in turn can be used to assess the impact of the policies, or to develop, or to be as the evidence for policy making. So that's how the actual work is. And I thought that how the knowledge is managed, of course, the different context, and the persons are saying it is ICT, and I agree what we hear through the earlier speaker, and then what Madam Kavita had said, that knowledge is not very new to us and to our society. So, but what has changed over the period? So probably that I am going to touch upon in a different way. But what I am going to say here is basically how the knowledge management perspective differs, when it comes to science and technology system. So some reflections and through some evidences I will bring to your knowledge and to your insight, and maybe you can react, and then it would be interesting. I thought that's where it is, and of course I will also touch upon the knowledge economy as well. So this is how the things are. Okay. So this is, I thought this would be the outline. I would touch upon like knowledge management in relevance, and how it is viewed as a knowledge economy, and then how the S&T system comes into interact with it, and who are the actors in that S&T system, and then if you have the knowledge to be managed, then what it leads to, and whether it leads to innovation, and if it leads to some kind of new products or something innovative, then question comes, are we then competitive? Because these are the things, ultimately knowledge per se in the book or information resides in the books. If and only if you read it, you understand it, then it becomes in the knowledge. Otherwise, it is still a piece of information. And it could be S&T information, it could be historical information. The knowledge is when you start reading it, when you start understanding, and when you start capitalizing on it, then only it is called knowledge. Otherwise, it is just merely a piece of information. So with this, and I thought I will touch upon some issues of access, information asymmetry, technology, employability, and skilled manpower, and then some lessons, what emerge. So this is how I thought I will bring up. And first to put it, this diagram, but then before that, I think that I've already said the importance of knowledge, but when you say a knowledge-based economy and a knowledge society, probably the knowledge society, what I understood, I may be partially wrong or partially right, but then what I have read also in the literature, and one point of time I was supposed to do some kind of my research work on knowledge economy indicators, but somehow it transformed to something else. So from there I picked up, again reviewed the literature myself, and then thought, let me pick up, where I left. But then when you say knowledge economy, it says the core or the heart is knowledge as well as the technology. So somebody was saying what has changed, and we are the same society, and then knowledge was earlier also important and equally important now. So somebody is saying the mode has changed. Of course, when you talk about the mode, primarily one understands as a ICT driven, or because it has become fast or easy access. But then knowledge is knowledge, But then the other things which have changed and converted is, it is spearheaded by none other than the technology. What has transformed it? It calls for a greater investment in R&D. And R&D leads to what? Again to new knowledge. Maybe the scientific knowledge. And greater, of course, use of ICT, yes. Growth of knowledge-intensive industries. When I say knowledge-intensive industries, the recent one is the biotechnology or the nanotechnology, which were not there earlier. So these are highly knowledge-intensive industries by which the applications, small research, small application in the lab could easily go into the market. So that has transformed, which was earlier was not there, so-called. And increased networking, collaborations, and rising skill requirements of a different kind. So that has changed the domain. So probably it needs to be seen in that context, how the knowledge economy. And then you see here in the slide there, now if I quote here, now it's aptly, of course, everyone say Peter Drucker is okay, but then I would like to quote here, then bring in our Professor Mashelkar, ex-DG CSIR, who said, how you aptly explain the importance of knowledge in the S&T context is, now if I say, when we buy 1 kilogram of a steel, it is 90% of it is material. And if I buy a copy of Windows 8 or Windows XP from the Microsoft, 95% of it is knowledge. So you see the contrast, which is the knowledge-driven product and which is the hard product, or the brick and the steel kind of a thing, brick and a mortar kind of. So there it distinguishes which carries more weight in terms of knowledge and which is just the original. So this is how, and it is knowledge is importance is, and how it is viewed in the S&T context. And even the OECD suggests that the knowledge as compared to the other resources like natural, physical, even the low skills labor has taken a greater importance, and it says that outside all the economies are driven toward the knowledge base. So when I say another indicator of how India is progressing is, see the shift from the agriculture dominated, economy towards a services oriented economy now. Now see the share of the service sector which has gone up, more than 60%, and the agriculture which used to be in the higher has come down to somewhere 18 to 20%. So if you 14%. So I just wanted to be, playing a slightly, moderate, but then 14%, he has corrected me, 14 to 18%. When I checked up was 18, but then maybe it is 14 now. So this is a transformation which has happened. And service industry, the new startups which are coming, they are coming in the ICT domain. They are not in the manufacturing still. And ICT sector is knowledge intensive. That's why the young students who are becoming now millionaire or multimillionaire are Flipkart, if you see, and all those Snapdeal.com and all those type of things. They are knowledge intensive. They are just idea which is capitalizing on the market. So simple idea, there is no gestation, just to play with the market and few ideas and combine with ICT, and then that's it, So you are bringing out the revenues through that, So that has changed, which was not there earlier. So how to capitalize and play in the market through science and technology, that is all about the knowledge economies. So probably the librarians view it in a different context, but then science and technology has its own, understanding of it. So if this diagram, if you see here, so when we say how then knowledge is linked to science, technology and innovation. When we take science is in the academic kind of an exercise for the pursuit of new knowledge, So as a result, you generate new knowledge, and it is scholarship driven. And when it comes to using of that science or some principles, then you come to some kind of a technology which comes into foreplay, and it is market driven. But when you talk about innovation, it is purely a competitive spirit. How the innovation means how you can play or advance the knowledge or manage the knowledge for your competitive advantage. So then that's how the innovation comes into. So that's how the knowledge. So it means the knowledge has to be managed, in terms of science and technology, how critical it is, And for any R&D organization, there are another set of, management jargons, or how do they manage, because they have to interface actually with the production system. See, how the knowledge has to be managed is and they cannot create a knowledge which is already available in the market. Otherwise, there is no need for an R&D. So R&D has to exist away from the market. It means they need a certain kind of a buyer or buying in for that kind of R&D. Then only it will translate into some kind of new products and processes. So that is where the management from other perspectives and science and technology perspective is has a different context altogether, and that's how it is more relevant to the economy, and that's how the knowledge economy, which talks about generation, distribution and uses of knowledge and technology. So that's how the whole concept of science, technology and innovation and the knowledge, is intricately linked, So when it is intricately linked, then the question arises, who are the main actors, in this game or in this system, Now, if you talk about it, there are certain independent research institutes, which we call research labs, and there will be private industry players who are also doing R&D. There would be state government, there would be NGOs, apart from the ministries which coordinate, which manage, and also to some extent have their own labs and associated with them. So they also in turn, help in the advancement of the knowledge production. So these are the actors engaged in the S&T system overall. Now coming here, before this diagram, I would like to say that there was, of course, many of you must be aware of it, that there was a report from the World Development and on the knowledge gaps, and they said the economies, which are, there's a context of developed and developing, and the developing economies lack in terms of knowledge gap and also the information gap. When we talk of knowledge gap, it is nothing but the technological gap or the know-how of doing things, and the information gap is the information access or disconnect of the information to convert that information to a knowledge for advancement of science and technology. So this is kind of a gap which was, highlighted, and they say there exists a knowledge divide between, the developed and the developing countries. Okay. Yeah, development. So what I mean to highlight is, now if I take one example of Ghana and Korea, so how do you estimate, their investments and something? You will say that they differ or they lag. Ghana lags behind Korea is because of the knowledge gap. So if I take Korea and Kuwait, now if just to illustrate, this my point, because Korea GDP per capita and Kuwait GDP per capita is altogether same. So what is making it different is it is not, because Kuwait depends on the natural resources of, say, primarily oil, but the Korea depends on the knowledge resources. You see its exports in terms of knowledge intensity or products, high-tech products, and also the manufacturing goods. So which economy is more sustainable? It is not Kuwait in the long run, because Korea in the long run, Kuwait will be exhausting someday or the other its natural resources. So it is a knowledge economy which is the winner. So that's how the importance here. And if you see here in this diagram, see India investment into R&D as GDP are still, that's what I thought I will bring some kind of an evidence. It is very low as compared to the other countries. And same, but then if you see here some investments going up, but then overall its ratio has still remained below 1%. So we need to understand that we are not investing much in the knowledge generation process. So probably we need to. And if you see here the structure, also again some kind of imbalance we see vis-a-vis Korea and the China, where the private industry itself dominates in the R&D, and then we have some kind of a structural lag here. So the structural barriers. And see, if you this is how, if you see here the China versus US and EU, so it is seen that how the China is going ahead in the knowledge domain, and it is envisaged that by 2025 it is going to surpass even the US. So that's how the game outside and the role of the R&D and the investments is. Now there's another survey, of course. I understand there's a limitation of time, but I would like to only give you 1 or 2 points here. We did the National Innovation Survey, first of its kind, and here we found that how of course, which has a focus more on the small and the medium-sized firms. But then the interesting is when we say a knowledge society, but then here is a reflection, of what kind of knowledge society we have. If our firms are already are devoting very little meager resources toward R&D or new knowledge generation vis-a-vis other group of nations. And see here the status of innovation. 70% of the firms are innovating in terms of new machines. So there is no emphasis, very less emphasis on the R&D. And 53% say they do not employ any scientists or engineers. So where will be the new knowledge coming, So just relying on the machines, So, and interestingly, if you ask them what kind of innovation they are doing, they are just doing new to the firm. And new to the firm, there is nothing new to the market, there is nothing new to the world. So new to the firm, when I say is new, you bring some kind of automation in your home, you say it's new to my home, So it is a very low kind of primitive kind of innovation it is happening, So it means it is just a survival in the market, and probably there is nothing happening. So these are the kind of reflections when we talk about towards a new knowledge society, as somebody said. So where is it, new knowledge society? So these are the indicators which reflect something else, So we need to improve upon. So of course, as I told, barriers is access to knowledge and information is a barrier, has been found by most of the innovative firms. Availability of skilled labor is a barrier. And interestingly, accessing institutional facilities for innovation, like it could be library, it could be other kind of information, it could be technological literature. There's a disconnect between innovation infrastructure and the production system. So unless and until library stores the information or the knowledge, but then there must be somebody to read and capitalize on that. So it's a complete disconnect, we find when we come to the industrial scale or the production scale, So this is where we need to ponder and work upon, and then how will be the sustainability of the knowledge society? So that's the question which comes into. Now here are some other indexes. I thought the time is running, but I could have given you a understanding of how the global competitiveness is. Again, we lack, in terms of of course, innovation, we may be okay, comparable if I compare India with Thailand in terms of 52 ranking and 54 ranking. But see the red in color, the infrastructure, health and primary education, higher education and training. So these are the factors we are very much low as a result of our ranking across, the global world is very poor. So it means we need to do something to sustain the knowledge society or so-called society, or the information society itself. So another interesting report which talks about the engineers, employability of the engineers, based on the 1,20,000 engineers, they have carried a survey, and they found that hardly 20% are employable. hardly 20% are employable for software, and 8% are employable for core engineering. And what is the reason? Lack of adequate domain knowledge. Lack of adequate domain knowledge is a key reason for low employability. Same, our one more study by DST in the power sector also found the employees are available, but then the employability is the issue. Again, this lack of domain knowledge. So what are we doing in the research? So there's a question to the university or higher education sector, the question comes here. So I'm creating, so what is the lesson now? Finally, okay, to the last slide. So knowledge is created by individuals, we know, and learning depends on the cognitive abilities. So concept of knowledge is closely linked with the learning organization. So are we not learning, or what was the concept of learning? Our libraries can sustain these kind of things, or they can impart a boost to kind of a learning concept. Of course, library will always be at the core of those learning organizations. So this is where it needs stimulation. So knowledge generation, dissemination into the production system, again I told, is a disconnect. So that needs some kind of institutionalization, how the knowledge has to be institutionalized and the learning has to be recognized. And continuous learning and institutionalization of learning, I feel, what I read and understood is the key, or if you unleash the human resource potential is key to knowledge management and innovation. And what our literature from Professor Amidon says is technology leaders need to develop innovation system that optimize knowledge flows. Of course, our previous speaker also said, through collaboration, network groups, or in virtual organizations. So it means then finally it calls for exchanging knowledge and exchanging experiences from the other countries so that we can bridge or divide this knowledge gap and come to some kind of efficiency and sustainability of the knowledge society. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Arora. I would like to see you.
I'm intervening here only to request Kavita ji, in a way, to ask a question with this very brilliant and precise presentation, which it's tacit assumptions. There are very serious tacit assumptions. And I think that in a gathering of this kind, which to my mind represents many levels of what are known as librarians, called librarians, perhaps those tacit assumptions need to be brought to the table. And I say this with great admiration, as also both hesitation and conviction, because we have placed the market in the center of our value system, and that has certain implications. Kavita ji.
Well, these have been two very informative presentations, and but somewhere I have had a little bit of a neurotic attack, because one is, I feel like that proverbial elephant being described by 6 blind men, and everybody who is on whatever side, somebody thinks the elephant is only large ears, and the other one thinks that it's only a small tail, and the third thinks it's a huge belly. And so no one comes to the totality of that elephant. As Dr. Vatsan is saying, some models. What are our models? Are they relevant to... See, all this ICT is, of course, I am the first user of ICT. As Dr. Majumdar would tell you, I do hours of work on my computer, in fact, before I even reach a library. But the model that has been presented, to my mind, and I could be wrong, is not a very inclusive one. I would, all our sort of arrogance, I would say, that we know best. I would like to repeat some myths of higher education. And one is that, we in the higher education as it has evolved with a certain model has actually destroyed everything worth living for. Our waters, our mountains, our forests, our even air. So we need to think that through, right? Everything is not the market. Innovation is not what sells in the market. So I think that really needs to be thought through. We also seem to have this arrogance that we've reached the pinnacle of our knowledge. We haven't. We also seem to think that whatever we destroy, we can put back. We can't. We also seem to think that our knowledge is only meant for upward mobility. The more you create, the sky is the limit, the more wealth you generate. And so this has many assumptions which are really the market model of a completely capitalistic society, trying to also become a welfare state, and we cannot take it. I mean, we are a different kind of a nation. We have to create an ecosystem where from the local to the global, and the global must adapt to the local just as local adapts to the global. I mean, we need to remember that it's our uneducated people who have kept the varieties of seeds alive for us. You know, a lot of our fauna, flora, diversity has been kept alive by the uneducated. I also want to put something on the table, and you have rightly said that there is a lack of employability in our professionals, in our higher education system, etc. Can we go behind that? Surely we are not a nation of stupid people. Is there something that we are doing which is leading to a lack of learning processes? Just giving laptops to everybody is not going to create a learning process, no? So if we are not a nation of completely stupid people, then the very fact that people go on trying to teach us and we refuse to learn, you know, we need to go behind that also to see what is it and what is our definition of learning. Is there a unitary model that this is what you know and then that's when you learn? The rest of it you don't learn. It's useless. You know, so, and the final thing that I would like to say, and I hesitate to say it in front of Dr. Vatsan, who knows far more about this than I do, just think of the manuscripts that are there, not just ones that we have discovered or preserved, but all those lying undiscovered. I mean, I went to Kerala. And one enterprising professor in Calicut University had collected 18,000 manuscripts, which were being just dumped out by people into the Raddi because their forefathers had collected them. Nobody knows now. They're all ICT literate. They're just dumping them to the kabadi. We cannot lose sight of that. So, you know, just the number of manuscripts burnt, destroyed, stolen, discovered, undiscovered. That is the point I was trying to make. That must have been a huge knowledge society. There is not an area of learning on which there is no Shastra. There's a Shastra to tell you how to train elephants and horses and how to make arrows and how to make pots. You know, so, and if this was the state, I do not believe what has been propagated, and I could be wrong, that only a small section of people were involved in learning and teaching. Imagine, go back and see what would have been the population of this country that produced all this. That means more or less the whole region was involved in the process of creation of knowledge and dissemination of knowledge. So there are many tacit assumptions here which are correct in their own way, but we need not exclude the others. They are equally valid, equally correct. And we will need to have an inclusive system. And that inclusion is not the kind of inclusive society we are trying to create by our mechanical, again, numbers and tick marks. It's a mind. It's a mind that says, I must have a look at this also. Let me explore it. And not to the exclusion, oh, we need to learn from Drucker, and I've read Peter Drucker. That's not the only way of management, you know. So anyway, this is my own little, you know, silly bit, but it is there. I mean, unless you change my mindset, it'll go on, you know. So
Thank you, Dr. Arora. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I learned a lot. Friends, this is, I'm intervening here even if it is perhaps irrelevant. But apropos of what Dr. Kavita Sharma has just said, it's not a question of merely looking back in terms of this country or this region's inheritance. And she began by narrating her own experience behind Jama Masjid or Fatehpuri or something like that. But I addressed myself with great hesitancy to Usha Munshi. She did speak about Greece and Rome, and someone like me who's been a professor of Western literature, etc., should know that. But Ushaji, you come from an area called Kashmir. You know when the first manuscripts were found there?
Was 6th century?
No, no, much earlier. Which are known as the Gilgit manuscripts. Those are the Gilgit manuscripts. And you come from Kashmir, so I will scratch your identity there. They were on Bhojpatra. And in your narration, I think that may have, in terms of the global, this thing. These are the earliest manuscripts. And of course they are post-papyrus, but they are pre-something. Also in terms of, and since I'm just an old woman who spent half a century or more scouting for manuscripts, and Dr. Call is here, and when I took up this matter with the Library Commission, they thought it was irrelevant, so they did not even reply to my letter. And that this country has as many as 3,000 or 35,000 manuscript libraries. These are only manuscript libraries, and I raise my voice here. The invention of the printing press was no doubt a great invention, and we're all thankful. So also we are thankful for the ICT today. But that does not mean at all that this inheritance of the world, and certainly of this region, and there is a difference. There is a difference between also, and I address myself to Dr. Sharma here as someone president of the SARC University, that there is a difference in terms of how whatever we call knowledge was stored in this part of the region as distinct from China. And we have to look at that difference. And we cannot begin our story from the Industrial Revolution. We cannot begin our story from the spindle. We have to go much further in order to jump much further ahead. And it is the CSIR, incidentally, which has made a database of, it is the CSIR, huh?
Traditional knowledge.
Traditional
TKT,
knowledge?
yeah.
TKT? Am I,
TKT.
yes, right? Am I wrong in that?
No.
All right.
No, you're
From from where has that come?
that is Indian.
No, just a moment. What I'm saying is that in our academic discourses, we forget about it, or we do not, because our terms of our discourse are terms of a much smaller time frame. and you need to have a longer time frame. That's the only point that I'm making. I'm not taking sides one way or the other, or even making a difference between traditional knowledge systems and modern knowledge systems. Knowledge is knowledge, Baba. उसे tradition और आप adjectives क्यों लगा रहे हैं उसके साथ? I mean, it has to be, and I won't come out with Hindi and Urdu and Sanskrit for your information, since you're all librarians. So I think that in our perspective of our discourse, especially those of you who are empowered today with the tools of managing what you are managing, it is you from this country who can bring about a revolution which will change the terms of reference in terms of our grading. And I have raised this question with Kavita ji in terms of the University Grants Commission and our grading system, which comes from certain parameters and certain indicators. Some of us have taken up the UNDP indicators of development also. So therefore, I don't buy that, as they say in American, what is it called, hook, sink, whatever. I don't, and I've lived long enough in America from one coast to coast, north to south, to say this, that I don't buy this totally. I think I need to have my own tools. I need to have my own tools of discourse. Those tools will then be both in terms of what we call the developing countries and those we call the developed world. Because I think that you can do a leapfrog, and you have the capacity and the potential to do so. Only don't go by